All right, Success for Life podcast back. We're on a two. I've packed all of a sudden with podcasts. This is usually my downtime, as you can imagine. We're getting towards Christmas, but I'm all of a sudden packed over these days with it. I'm excited with my guest today, Joey Drolshagen. This is going to be a lot of fun. So kind of hang on to your seat. This guy, we're in the green room telling me about how he's hang gliding. He takes life by the throat and he goes after it. So I'm excited to talk. This is going to be a lot of fun. Welcome, Joey. Welcome to the Success for Life podcast.
Oh, great to be here. Really excited to have this conversation. Even the minute we got in the green room there, it just sparked this whole thing. It's going to be a great conversation, David. Thank you.
No problem. It's great to have you on. All right, so we're going to talk about the mind today, and we're going to dive into it, and we're going to dive into the subconscious of the mind, the conscious of the mind. I've done a few podcasts on the mind, so and everybody has a slightly different take of how they're doing things, and so I really want to dive into it. First, before we get into any of that stuff. Tell us a little bit about your background. What you did before and how you got into this.
Absolutely, David. And, I grew up in a very low income blue collar family in Detroit, Michigan. 5 kids. My mom worked all night as a court reporter, dictating and full time. And my dad worked in heavy equipment and just beat the heck out of himself with, knee replacement, hip replacement, multiple back surgery. And I saw them exhausting themselves and living under that burden of stress and everything else my entire youth growing up. And I swore at 9 years old, I had an instance happen. I went over a friend's house and hung out, and his dad gave us $20 and told us to go to Dairy Queen, take our bikes to Dairy Queen. My family, you had to save up to do that, and so I noticed that difference in energy. And I went back home and it was like, man, I'm not living like this. You people are not doing something right, as a 9-year-old kid, right? And then I went into my adult life with those same struggles over and over again. I've struggled financially, regardless of my income. Life had to be stressed. If something came easy for me, I thought I was doing something wrong. Like I thought I wasn't following the path right if it unfolded with ease, And I started going through that. And at 22, I became a student of the works I do today. And as I stepped deeper and deeper into that over the next almost 3 decades, I've learned so much about the total mindset, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and then that programming within the subconscious mind, which is all of our conditions, habits, paradigms, all that. And that's that voice we hear in our head that when we get an idea to do something, it'd say, well, who do you think you are? How are you going to do that? Look at where you come from, and that thing that continually pulls us back into the struggle. And I could do nothing different about that until I learned about that motherboard in that subconscious that hosts all of that conditioning. That's playing that's the voice we hear in our head. Once I started understanding how to shift that and how to reprogram that, all of a sudden doorways started opening. And I built a career coming from a family like that. I built a career in an executive vice president position, building massive territories, leading organizations that were in bankruptcy back into profitability within record timing and stuff. And like, if you ask me inside of myself, I tell you, I can't do that. There's no way. I don't have the ability to do that. But shifting that subconscious opens up doorways. And so then I resigned from corporate America about a decade ago. And I went off on my own, and it was helping people transformation, helping business owners, realtors, people in personal transformation, personal development to really get that mindset in alignment, that conscious mind of where we focus on in alignment with that programming, because it's in the subconscious that triggers our brain waves and tells us which actions to take and which ones not to take because of fear, doubt, and worry, or why we're not that's not possible for me to do, so then we don't take that action and stuff. And so understanding the knowing is in our conscious mind of what we want, and that's often so far out of alignment with what our subconscious programming is playing to us over and over and over, and that's how that disconnect comes in. So does that make sense, David?
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And so what was the impetus for taking yourself from saying, hey, I grew up a certain way, I grew up in a similar fashion, okay. And divorced parents, Mother financially still struggles. Father was a teacher, and obviously with the divorce, all of a sudden went from teacher salary, whatever that is, but to now having to pay for a home he doesn't live in, and obviously family, going back and forth. So I understand, and the whole thing was about just, hey, you just gotta get a job, put your head down. Um, this is how life is, like, kind of thing. And even though I was a great athlete as a coach and stuff, because that's what he was, he'd be all about, hey, doing the best you can, and you could be anything you want to be. But you would see that, and he was that way as a leader. But as far as from a financial standpoint, it was like there was no, and it's because of how he grew up, right? They grew up poor.
Yeah.
So it becomes ingrained in his head. So he was this great leader outside of that, like with leading kids, and instilled that in me. But from the financial standpoint, created a limitation, which then begins your programming. Every time you start to prosper, you look over your shoulder, is there some sort of trick going on here? How am I prospering, right? And you started to talk about that. So I want to dive really into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where is this? What is this programming that happens to us, good or bad, right? Because there are people that who come from a lot of money, have certain programming financially, but maybe not relationship wise, or maybe not, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
So what is that programming wise? What is that like? And what is the impetus for people to start to move out of that realm?
And that's great questions, and you covered a lot in that.
I know. You pick whatever you want.
And so one
at a time, Joey.
Yeah, let me go back. So the impetus for me was really, I mean, it was nothing more than my entire life falling apart. I had a 20-year marriage I should have never been in, but I kept trying to people please and keep it going, and everything else that should have ended after 6 months or a year, but it kept going, and I had that happen. And so I was going through a divorce. I had a 9-year-old child at the time who was in Michigan. I was in Wisconsin. I was separated from. So when the divorce happened, it split him and I, and that's since worked out. But it was that I was using alcohol to cope with how miserable my life was, to cope with the fact that I could not achieve what I truly wanted to achieve in my lifetime. And I didn't know what else to do. And so I started using things like food and alcohol. And then what really capped it all off is my dad passed away. And then within a year, my mom just didn't want to be alive without him, and passed of natural causes. And I found myself an orphan. And all of that was enough for me. Now, I'd already been doing these works, and I had been in coaching programs, and I had been in, school. I was getting certification after certification in coaching and stuff. But none of that really rose me up. It was when all that stuff happened and my life literally fell apart that I was like, man, I don't want to live like this anymore. And within that spark, and right about that same time, I have done a lot of work with things like The Secret and manifestation and law of attraction and all of that stuff, alignment with church things. I'm also a minister, so I deliver Sundays. So I had all that stuff already going. But once I understood the subconscious mind and how we can never get beyond our conditioning, I started realizing that's what's trapping me right there. And so that's when I started deep diving into looking at that subconscious. And all it really is it's all of our conditioning that we've received from the time we were born through even right now, you and I are receiving conditioning. And so what happens is we receive conditioning that helps support living the way we want. It helps support how to walk through our fears. It helps support, and it changes that voice that we hear in our head. As we shift our subconscious conditioning, we start hearing different tunes and tones coming from that voice in our head that says, who do you think you are? You can't do that. Look at where you grew up. Look what's in your bank account. Look at that. And it plays over and over and over. It just keeps freaking spinning. Well, what happens is when we reprogram it, and I've developed the SMT method, which is subconscious mindset training, David. And the whole purpose of that is to help. The program will take you through so it bumps us up against that conditioning that's causing us limitation, so that we can then perception shift. We can shift perceptions on that. We can start shifting that conditioning and putting new empowering conditioning in place of it. And instantly, and when I say instantly, what took me years, my clients achieve in weeks. It starts opening up that avenue to greater opportunities and greater potential in our life.
What is, you mentioned a method, absent? I never heard of it. So
As I developed it, it's called. I'm actually going to be. I was telling you in the green room. I'm going to be in Times Square in a couple weeks with up on the marquee in Times Square based on the works I've done. But I abbreviate it, call it SMT method, and it stands for subconscious mindset training. So you and I both know there's a lot of different coaching out there, and a majority of coaching that's available to people is to give them this list of things to do, give them the ABCs of what to do, right? And then what we do is we supposedly carry out those things, and you have accountability, somebody pushing you to take those actions. And then you're supposed to achieve this great life change. But what happens in that is people are following these ABCs that are put together by somebody else, and it doesn't lead them. It leads them to such minute changes in their life. I tell everybody I work with, David, I don't know your pathway, but I'm really freaking good at helping you identify that and then develop systems of accelerating habits that help launch you into living that life of that.
Very interesting. So the habits you're talking about, what are some of the habits that people have to start to form, right? There's, I'll make something simple up for, so changing my diet, right? Going from, I love cheeseburgers, okay? And it's like a weakness. And because I love cheeseburgers, I could go 4 or 5 days without them, but the 5th day, 6th day, I have to have a cheeseburger, right? Right. So now I formed some good habits, meaning I there's a salad place that I get chicken in there and a bunch of things to kind of replace that habit as much as possible. So it's now ingrained in my brain after doing this for several months that, hey, did you have a salad today with all the stuff I like in it? I like say I have kale and I put a whole bunch of good stuff in it. But it really has made a difference. So in order to do that, I had to form a habit, right? So I had to kind of get that reprogramming, because instead of going to Wendy's to get a cheeseburger for lunch, I go and get a salad most of the time. Now, I don't want to starve myself of some reward. So every once in a while, I might have one once, just so I enjoy it.
Sure.
But I can enjoy it a lot more as opposed to the bad feeling, because I'm doing it every day. Was doing it every day, right? So when I do it, I know, hey, I'm going right back to having what I normally do, my salad the next day, and not letting that dive into, which is the key thing in the conscious mind. One cheeseburger that day turning into 5 days in a row of cheeseburgers and getting away from my habits. Reason why I bring it all to this is saying the habits forming in the subconscious mind. What are some things people can do to form habits that create things in their subconscious mind so it triggers some of the things you're talking about?
Yeah, and one of the things I'll tell you with that is we are so often conditioned that if you want something, you got to take massive actions towards it, right? You got to be willing to trade some things off for what you really want.
Robbins. That's Tony Robbins, right?
I don't associate a name with it, but
I do.
I completely differ from that, because what that does is it causes us exhaustion, and it causes us to start using things. And so all of a sudden, somebody who wants to eat healthy feels like I'm doing all of this. I'm not going to sacrifice that. I'm going to eat that burger every single day, because damn it, I deserve it. And what I do is I help people, take one single action into what they want to achieve, something in that direction. Somebody who's a couch potato who wants to run a marathon. All you have to do is go out and take a 5-minute walk, and that will lead to a marathon. And that's what I mean by systems of accelerating habits, is we do one thing and that leads to the next thing. You eat one salad instead of a burger, and it starts sparking that vision of how we want to be and how we want to live and how we want to be. Ultimately, we want to live in balance. We don't want to spend our whole life on the couch. We don't want to spend our whole life trading our entire life away to have the things we want. So when you start developing this and you start stepping into that, it's really based on this theory of leaning into what feels good. I was just talking to somebody the other day and we were talking about food. So I'll use the burger one, although it wasn't about burgers. And it's like, to have a burger every once in a while, man, it feels really good. It's like a treat, right? It's like, man, I love that grease feeling and that, like the mixture and everything else and stuff. But if I do that for 3, 4, 5 days in a row, it doesn't have the same feeling it had that one day. So when we start understanding that and we leaning into what feels good, and at the same time, we have a process to help us. So everything I work with, David, begins with what I call a dynamic vision. And I have road mapping tools. And I have helped organizations that were in bankruptcy to get back into profitability. And when I say organizations, I mean like $150 million corporations get back into profitability within months, get new ownership, customer retention, everything it's a miserable life to lead a company through that. And to do it more than once is insanity on my part, But I've also helped so many business owners and realtors and people who want to achieve things. I work with a company right now who's identifying the #1 basketball player in the world. So I'm getting to work with these basketball players and get that mindset shift going, get them beyond that point of looking at life of why they can't because of where they grew up or because of the opportunities. They didn't get to go to college and get noticed. They didn't get, these opportunities and stuff. So their subconscious mind will cancel them out of that into opening up that champion and bringing that champion out. And I'm telling you, you see the difference on the court between these guys who are floating like Michael Jordan did up and down the court and the guys that are out there putting in extensive effort and exhaustive actions and everything else trying to make it happen, And everything I do where I differ from so many coaching programs, I don't have your ABCs. I help you develop what those are that then we start working on shifting into systems of accelerating habits. We do it all vision-based and we start opening up things. So one of the things I'm very well known for is helping businesses scale very quickly, but maintain a healthy life balance and not give up your family and your health and your well-being and everything else in order to have that business there.
Interesting. It sounds like I need you.
So we will talk after this. We'll go back to the green room.
I don't often say that too, because I interview over the last 4 years. I've been interviewed probably 1,000 people, but it's something that's obviously I think you hit on a couple of really good points there. So they always talk about, and you might be familiar with some of the, our motivational speakers of today, Grant Cardone, Gary Vayner. They're all different. Gary Vaynerchuk, Bradley. I mean, I'm just naming a few. They all have their value in different ways, right? Yeah. And they all talk about different ways of going about it, which I think for people who consume that marketplace, right, who want to succeed, I think it could be confusing for them. And I enjoy listening to it because I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years, and I've gone through my highs and lows. But I always look for like a nugget. People are looking for the answer from these guys. I really look more for a nugget that might help me in my daily. That can help. I don't put all in. Like there are people I look at the comments. People are all in on Gary V. Like Gary V. Like they think it's the gospel, and he's not the gospel. He's really take away a good nugget that might help you. So the reason why I talk about that is their overall theme. Now, not Cardone. Cardone's theme is a little different. But Gary, let's talk Gary for a second. Gary's theme is, 50,000 posts a day on social media. This and that. And I'm viral on social. I got a 600,000 followers in this Twitter account, 230,000 followers in this.
Yeah.
And all I have found that
you're doing really well.
Right. And all I found that it really does. Now, obviously, it's helped my business. Okay. So I that part he's right on. But all I found is that if you don't have control of certain things within your life, you end up just spending all your time doing this instead of going business. And why I say this is he's talking about hustle, 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 hustle. And I always think to myself, if you're not doing things smartly, you're going to hustle your way to bad health, and you're going to hustle away. And I'm a football coach for 20 years.
Mhm.
I see what at the college level, many of my friends, college football is so in the NFL. It's so all encompassing. It's so those guys are so all in. They're working basically 20 hours a day, and they're losing their health. So what does it matter if you have $10 million a year if you're going to die 5 years from now, right?
Or you lost your family because you gave them none of your time.
You lost your family, right? That's a big, big thing. And I talked about this actually yesterday a little bit with my guest. I just know him as Billy Shoes, but he is a gentleman that was paralyzed as a college student, and he's now built this business from the ground up. And we talked about scaling, and we talked about doing it smartly, and how you could do it where you don't lose yourself and all that kind of. I thought he had really good insight in that standpoint.
Yeah.
And so you see all this stuff out there. They're like, go harder, go faster, go more. And what does it all lead to? Are we trying to accelerate our deaths? I mean, is that what we're trying to do?
It leads to exhaustion. It leads to burnout. Like, here's one of the things that I found. And let me just tell you, over the past 30 years, 28 years or whatever, I've invested like tens of thousands of dollars in the coaching programs. I've done multiple, like one-on-one and groups and this and that and everything else and stuff. And one of the things, it took me a long time to learn this, but one of the things I started looking at is there's these people who find their success pathway, right? Grant Cardone, I like all three of the gentlemen you talk about. I look up to them.
Yeah.
But they're not my pathway.
Correct.
What they've taught me really is to identify my pathway, because do you know what percentage of people that do the coaching programs and everything else? I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but do you know what percentage of people ever achieve the same results that they have?
What?
Less than 1%.
I believe it.
And the reason being is their pathway works for them. Man, Tony is the most intense person. And I haven't met him. He's the most intense person I've ever met. I don't have that intensity. I can't follow that massive actions and get. I'm getting excited here, but I can't follow massive actions and get results out of that. I get burnout and I get fatigue and that's why the whole specialty of what I do and where I differ from all of that, I don't know your ABCs. I'm really freaking good at helping you identify your pathway. And I have systems set up in various ways to do that so that you walk away knowing your pathway to success. And what works for you, David, will never work for me. And it'll never work for somebody else and somebody else. And that's why I tell people I use my history and what I've learned and how it's impacted me as a way just to motivate people. But you have your pathway that you're on. So the best I can do is help you identify what that is and do so quickly. And that's the reason the name of my company is IFGT Life Coaching. And the IFGT stands for It's Freaking Go Time. And that's really what it is. It's time to get in there, identify what that is, make those shifts. And all of a sudden, every client, almost 1,000 clients over the past decade, every client starts having breakthroughs with out of the blue opportunities and things working out in ways that they could not have constructed through their logical mind. Massive actions, all that stuff and everything is incorporating our logical mind at a whole new level. But the way to ease and the way to open that stuff up in our world and the way to do so quickly and the way to scale quickly and whatever it is that we want to do, it doesn't come between our ears. So we have to tap into and utilize all of our mental faculties. And two of the ones I utilize a lot that are really skipped over is our imagination. When we develop that vision, we're utilizing our mental faculty of imagination. And then we have things like intuition and things like that. And when I'm going massive, when I'm going 150 miles an hour, my intuition is silent. I don't hear it at all. Does that make sense?
Yes. So
And when I was
trying to do,
first
are
started
we trying to
developing,
bring out our intuition? We're trying to bring out our ability to find our path, and that's. I mean, how, like, so what's confusing to me, I guess, is
yeah,
the bringing it out, right? So, and identifying like which way you're gonna go, and knowing, you know who you are. You learn about what your strengths and your weaknesses are. Those are all obviously important things. Translating that to getting out of your limiting mindset. Everybody has different limiting mindsets. How does, like, beyond, like, I can start doing habits that works.
yeah,
Is
you can.
there any like technique that you may use that's different than anybody else out there?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just what I use in the tools. The SMT method is standalone as far as the way it's put together. And I've had mentors like Mary Morrissey, Bob Proctor, and things like that. So it's an accumulation of all of this growth. Some Tony Robbins things and stuff like that, that intensity and stuff, and how we tap into that stuff. So when you look, everything is an accumulation of what the best way of doing it is, but also the easiest avenue to achieve it. So when you and I were talking about that burger, right? And so one of the ways we change this now, David, so many people I come across, and I'll say to them, what's your greatest desire for your life? And they go, I don't know. Right?
Yeah,
And
of
what
course.
happens is we start living by the situations, circumstances, and conditions that come up in our world have such a high influence on us because we don't have anything else that's driving us.
We get caught in the busy work instead of the vision.
We do. So now when we develop a vision for what that is, you could take that person who's eating, and I'll tell you, everything I do, I was like the guinea pig for. Everything involved in the SMT, I was the guinea pig. I ran 150 miles an hour. I had two businesses and traveling every single week for building territories and building a house and the builder's license and the pilot's license and all this at the same time, which led to that burnout. So I was doing all of that stuff, going 150 miles an hour, and life was so freaking hard. So when I talk about this stuff, I have firsthand experience with it. I have the experience of shifting that into how I get to live today. And I have the experience of taking 1,000 clients through this over the past decade and seeing their life completely transform into this. So
what did you do to shift it? What did you do to shift it for yourself? What
there's
was
an
it?
entire process I followed, but the first part of it was my awareness of how miserable I really was. And then once I developed a vision, I call it a dynamic vision. I had road mapping tools and stuff. But once I developed this vision for my life and I saw myself lifting, working out and having a body that showed I worked out, and living healthy and having moderation in my life, having time for downtime, having things that I enjoy. What do I want? Where do I want to go? What kind of things do I want to do? The hang gliding is one of those. So is fishing and motorcycling and jeeping and all the things I do. I live my passions in my life. So once we get a vision for that, then all of a sudden, as we start opening up that vision, we're going to bump up against that conditioning, right? Because all of a sudden it's going to be like, well, who do you think you are? You can't jump off a 2,000 foot mountain with a hang glider. Like you're too afraid to do that. And all of a sudden I'm doing that, and so it bumps us up against that so that we can shift that and put new empowering programming in place of it. And there's an entire process I take people through, but overall, in general, that's the process we follow.
Interesting. So have you ever heard, who Lou Holtz is?
Yes.
So Lou Holtz had in I can't remember which book it was, but in one of his books he had wrote that, and it was very humorous because he had lost his, back many years ago, he lost his coaching job, was fired as an assistant, and he started writing down. He was home and he started writing down all the things he wanted to do in his life.
Yeah.
And he came up with like 108 things. And he wrote that down and he showed it to his wife and he was all excited. And his wife put, you have to put one more thing on there. And he said, what? Get a job, But he had 100 and he always has great stories. But
Yeah.
he had these 108 things. What was really interesting about it was of those things, and this when he wrote this book, it was, as a time it was about almost 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago when he had written it at the time. He had done like 104 out of the 108 things in his life.
Nice.
So what was interesting, it always sticks with me, a simple thing like just what are some of the things you like to do in your life, and just writing all of them down by actually writing it down and visualizing it. He created the impetus to be able to start making it happen without him actually, he hadn't even yet taken an action, but now in his head, these were things that at some point in his life, he wanted to do.
Yes.
And I guess you could always revisit that, right? You just have this, in his case, a piece of paper, right?
Yes.
And in your life, as you knock down one, let's say, you're going to live, let's say, hopefully you live 90 years or 85, 90 years, maybe more for hopefully some people. But let's say you lived 85, 90 years. You started that when you were 25, 30. If you think about it, out of 100, let's say it's 100 things. If you did 3 things a year, 4 things a year, you would do all of them by the time you
would. And this is where it gets a little mixed up, and it used to for me, because I used to hear stuff like that, and I go, man, I want to be that way. Like I got excitement. I want to live this exciting life, And then I walked away going, man, what's the matter with me? Because I would get one of those items there, and my voice would be saying, well, who do you think you are? You can't do that. Come on, like, be realistic, right? That's one of the things, that's conditioning, And I couldn't get over that hurdle. And so what happens a lot of times, I describe things as like the masses, the 82% of the people who never achieve what they really want to achieve in their life at the level they want to. So they live much more mediocre lives. They settle. Where, okay, I want this, but really I'm going to take this, and that's okay, and I'm going to be okay with it. They settle. And then there's the crushers, those top producers, the people who achieve what they want to achieve, and they make it look easy doing it. I used to be one of the masses, and I lived like that. And David, I didn't know why. I didn't know what was the matter with me with that. But what happens is, when you look at the thinking model of the masses, is as soon as they get a spark of an idea, they instantly, that voice starts speaking up, and it beats it up. And then so when they go into the thoughts of what they want to do, they're almost trying to overcome their own thinking. They are trying to overcome their own negative thinking about it. They have no feeling tone going into it. And most people's desires die right then and there in that feeling tone, without having a single action taken in it. And that's what I experience, and the clients I work with experience in whatever area they're in, where they're stuck, over and over and over again. And it's that subconscious conditioning. So once we go in there and shift that, then what you're talking about works perfectly. And I'll tell you, I went off my first mountain launch with the hang glider, and I recorded it, and I stood up there and I said, man, I've been wanting to do this for decades. Fear has stopped me. No more. And then there was another camera that shot me literally running off of that ledge with a hang glider, and the launch and everything else and stuff like that. And so when we look at those things, it works great if you're on that side of it, if your conditioning is built for that. And some people have, if you look at Donald Trump's children, they've had different conditioning than what guys like you and I have had, right? So they're more in line to be able to do. They may be miserable in relationships or miserable whatever, but they're more in line with aligning with that because of their conditioning. So if you have that right conditioning, that's perfect. Where I come in is if you don't have that natural lineup of conditioning, you can take what you have and build it into that very easily and very quickly to where you're experiencing life like what you're talking about right there. That's where the benefit of what I bring to the table is.
That's amazing. That jump to being able to think an ideal of what you want to happen, and to be able to make it happen, and to do it in a comfortable fashion in your own way. It sounds like really what you're trying to help people do, versus trying to be like him or like her. And because you're not them, you're not going to do what they do.
And their pathway is not going to work for you no more than your pathway would work for them. So it's identifying. So instead of, the robotic conditioning we get from school, again, everything we talk about, I can bring back the conditioning,
Right.
but that we both do this work. And if you do a certain level of it, okay, then you get to pass and go on. And if I don't, then I have to repeat, and we set up that robotic follow A, B, and C, follow this model, boom, 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 robotically, right? And we're taught that through school. We're taught that through, I give leadership seminars, like multi-day leadership seminars. I'm doing one for the for the local government down here where I live right now. And it's a 7-month process. And it's amazing how many leaders are taught to be leaders by following somebody else's system and processes, if I were doing it, rather than tapping into their own internal resources and bringing those outwardly. When you look at Patton and you look at the people who have changed our world from a leadership, they didn't follow what somebody else told them to do. They brought those leadership abilities from the inside out. And that's what all of this is, really. It's going within and tapping into that. One of my favorite quotes in the world, and I never say it right, is by Marianne Williamson. And she says, our fear is not that we're powerless. That's not our greatest fear. Our greatest fear is how powerful we really are. And we have the capability within us to identify and shift that conditioning and experience a life completely different. We have the power to experience life at the level of our desires do, like the crushers do. We all have that, but we're afraid of it because of the conditioning. So having something that opens up that conditioning, can you see how that would naturally lead you to developing your roadmap to success in life?
Yeah, it makes an enormous difference. You can create the roadmap because you get out of your conditioning. Otherwise, you can't even create the roadmap. You're actually limited as to what you can begin to even start to make happen. You've got to be able to work your way out of that. It's fascinating stuff. And I could talk probably about this for 50 hours with you.
Me too. Let's do it, man. Let's do a marathon.
I have 9,000 questions more. But it's fascinating. I wanted to conclude with this. When you made your transition, what was in yourself that you feel and realized, hey, I'm starting to get there? Like, what was, so people can understand what you start to feel when you start to get there? And everybody will feel something different, but there has to be some sort of common feeling as human beings when we start to get where we want to be. Doesn't mean it's always going to stay that way, because we have to work to make that happen. But what is that feeling like? What is that?
Yeah, before I answer, I just have to say we don't have to work.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
Actually,
I'm glad you pointed that out.
Actually, part of the thing we got to do is stop freaking working so hard. That's what keeps it going and keeps the conditioning alive and well and give it more power and everything else. Is, each time we do a massive
wait. So you're telling me not to work hard?
Well, think about this. To utilize your imagination isn't work, right? It's shutting off the logical mind. It's giving it a break. So instead of figuring out everything you have to do and the strategy and the to-dos and the exhaustive to-do list and everything else, instead of doing that, give it a freaking break. And instead come up with what it is, what's a vision for how you want to live life. Forget how you're going to do it for a moment and just get into identifying what that is. You're bringing so much more power, which most people don't do, is to identify what is that vision. So even that is less work. And then as we go from there, and if we slow down our pace, instead of living through logic and figuring it out on our own, and think about how little power I have living through my logical mind versus all the other avenues of intuition and everything that's available to me. And if I'm using this, I can't get that. Because the louder this gets, our intuition is only as loud as our willingness to listen. I can't go 150 miles an hour and hear my intuition. I can't be building my strategies and my to-dos and all of that and my avenue and everything and still hear my intuition. I got to slow that down. So it really is slowing down. And one of the things, and most of my clients have such a hard time with this, David, but it's awesome when they get it. And this is an avenue how you'll know and be able to identify. is things will start showing up. The results of what you want to achieve will start showing up easier. There's less effort. There's more of a flow. We hear all the time about in a canoe, and we can either go with go with the flow, or we can paddle uphill, or paddle upstream, rather uphill, paddle upstream, and it really is that in application. You'll know when you're doing it because it'll be like you're in this flow, like things will just start working out. I have so often that I'll overhear somebody at a coffee shop, and we all do overhear something. Well, we don't all do it. I got to slow down to do it, to hear it, or I'll catch something someplace, and it'll have or somebody I'll be talking to, and they'll bring up something. I'm going, oh my God, I was just looking at how am I going to do that? You just answered it. Things will start showing up easier. Now there's that side of things, but until we do something about the conditioning in what I call that motherboard in the subconscious, we can only go as far as that will allow us to, as far as that voice in our head will allow us to. So we got to do something to shift that conditioning in there. And again, what's taken me 3 years to figure out that's included in the SMT method now, my clients are achieving that in weeks.
That's incredible.
It is.
It really is incredible. And I think about this as far as from a methodology, right? So, and this contradicts what people have told you your whole life, right?
Yes.
Almost everybody, right? And I think that's the beauty of it. But it completely contradicts how people, and you hear this everywhere. Keep working, and something's gonna happen. Like, what do you mean?
If you do it long enough, it'll bring about change.
Right. 10,000 hours, in order to become an expert. Malcolm Gladwell.
It's true. The problem is the change it brings is exhaustion and burnout. And then seriously, to the point where people don't, like, I work with a lot of realtors, and they get all this stuff of all these things they have to do and everything else. And they get to a point of going, I don't even want to be in real estate anymore, when they have this huge passion in their heart to help people find that home for their family and everything else. And they're really connected when they get into it. And within a year and a half, they're like, man, I can't do this. This is too much. And they don't have to live that way, though. So it does bring change. It's just not the change we want to experience. And I am opposite. When you look at how we're programmed, so many coaches and coaching programs are right in alignment with that programming. Work hard. We'll give you the ABCs. We'll scale your business. We'll tell you what to do to succeed, to be successful. I don't want somebody telling me what I need to do to be successful. I want somebody to show me how to figure out how I achieve success, because success is a very personal thing to me. And it's about me and what I perceive to be success. So somebody else can't tell me how to achieve that because they don't know what that means to me.
So you said that you're a minister, right?
I am.
God. Okay. God. And
I'm a minister that cusses and rides a Harley and has tattoos.
Okay. That's okay. That is, God does not judge that.
He doesn't.
Back, right. Where does religion fall? And everybody's different. So I'd rather ask from your standpoint, at least.
Yes.
Where does religion fall for you in this whole kind of process?
And I'll tell you, this is nowhere. Religion falls nowhere in this. Spirituality is everything for me. Everything I do is based on spirituality. It's based on that connection with higher sources, whether people refer to it as universal, whether they refer to it as God, whatever it is, and utilizing all of that power, which is has so much more capability than what Between My Two Ears has. So it's tapping into that.
Interesting. Do you think that religion can be a positive for developing getting out of that limiting mindset, or a negative? Meaning, do people create it as an albatross on themselves? Or I guess it depends on the person. Maybe I'm answering my own question.
Well, we're kind of going personal too, because what I would tell you, for me personally, religion is conditioning. When I go and somebody tells me how to think and how I should put things in order and how I should pray and how I should do, there's a lot of times, David, when I don't go to church on a Sunday or things like that. I don't go do a service if I'm not speaking and things like that. And I'll get in my Jeep and I'll go sit in the woods in the forest up on the mountain, and I'll have service right there. I'll just take that time to be. And there's times when I'll get on the motorcycle. There's times when I'm hang gliding. I'm very prayerful right before I run off that top mountaintop.
I'm sure.
And so it's avenues like that for me where I found, again, for me, religion is conditioning.
Interesting.
Spirituality is where I start developing a one-on-one relationship with that power that be in my life. I choose to call God, but universal power, universal principles, things like that and stuff. It's where I start taking that and people can explain it to me, but I make my own decisions on building that one-on-one relationship.
Interesting. In the end of all this, what kind of results for people working with you? What are they achieving in the end?
Complete breakthroughs. Now, one of the things I'll tell you is I have 100% money back guarantee. If somebody works with me, whether they come to me for business, personal development, whatever, and everything is personal transformation. Even people I help in business that are staunch business people and stuff going, forget about that personal development. I want business. And I know it's all that. So but incredible breakthroughs. We've come out of the gate developing that vision, and then, like I said, I guarantee people that we start moving and opening up that vision in our life, shifting that subconscious conditioning, and doing so within a matter of weeks. So people, when I work with people, they have a 100% money back guarantee that they're going to get results, or I'll give them their money back. And I'll tell you, out of 1,000 clients that I've worked with, I've had one client, and she didn't ask for her money back, but the first week we worked together, she was in real estate, and she said, well, I need to send you every week what I've achieved, what I'm going to achieve at the beginning of the week and what I achieved at the end of the week. And so I go, I don't need you to do that. She goes, I need to do that. And I go, okay. Well, then the second week, she called me. She goes, I need you to build a form that I need to fill out every day and send to you. And so, being young in it and stuff like that, and I want to serve, I go, okay. The third week, she goes, if I don't call you every day at 5:00 and tell you what I did that day, I need you to call me. And I go, you know what? This isn't going to work. You're looking for somebody to push you into taking action after action after action after action. And you'll never get the results of what I want to bring out for people in doing that. So what if we just cut past here and I should have picked, and that taught me, because now I look for that. And the people who are so dead set on that, I can't help. If they're so dead and locked into that conditioning that they won't hear of anything else is even possible, I can't help them.
Interesting. Very, very, very interesting stuff. Well, I'm mind blown. Tell people where they can find you, follow you, get a hold of you. What's the best way?
Anybody can go to Joey Drolshagen. You can go on any of the social medias, things like that, pick me up. I have a website called ifgtcoach.com. The IFGT stands for It's Frickin' Go Time. And then anybody that wants to take it from here and have a conversation like this, David, they can go to coachwithjoey.com and schedule a 10-minute conversation and get on the phone directly with me. And we'll have that conversation and see what's going on for you. We'll see what's possible. I can give you some tools to start moving you that way. And if you're interested in hearing more about what I do and interested in that, we can go to the next step of that. But it's just a 10-minute conversation to say hello. People can say, hey, I heard you with David, great conversation. Or I heard you with David, I think you're full of shit. Whatever they, whatever they want to say, something like that, because I'm open to all of it, Yeah. And then spark that. Because I've had people call me up and go, man, I heard you on this interview, and I think you're full of it. And I go, okay, why is that? And we hang up the phone maybe over 10. It might have been 15 minutes later. But the person has a spark of a new idea that they can apply then in their life. So even in that, I'm open to.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. It's been great having you on. I learned a ton. And we hopefully will see you soon. I'm definitely going to maybe book my 10-minute conversation with you and go from there. For the Success for Life podcast, I'm Coach Schuman with Joey Drolshagen. Thanks so much for being on today, and have a great day.
Thank you, David. Awesome conversation. Really enjoyed it.